In the farthest corner of the Oak Ridge Animal Shelter, there was a pen most visitors never noticed. It was shadowed by a stack of worn-out crates and broken carriers, dimly lit by a flickering fluorescent bulb that buzzed overhead. The kennel was small, not even big enough for a dog to run in, and the smell of antiseptic mixed with age-old despair lingered in the air like an old ghost. This was where Benny lived, a blind senior Labrador mix with a coat the color of ash and ears that had lost their perk long ago. He'd been there for nearly 5 years. 5 long, silent years. Benny wasn't aggressive, didn't bark or growl at passers-by, and never caused trouble. But maybe that was part of the problem. In a shelter full of barking, tail-wagging dogs clamoring for attention, Benny just lay there quietly. His world was darkness, and his days were a monotony of silent waiting, listening to the sounds of other dogs getting chosen, their excited barks fading down the hallway toward freedom. Benny would turn his head when he heard the clang of a leash or the squeak of shoes on the linoleum floor, but no one ever came for him. He waited, tail still and ears barely twitching just in case. The staff did what they could. Sarah, the young volunteer who worked weekends, always brought him soft blankets and sometimes snuck him bits of chicken from her lunch. "Hey, sweet boy," she'd whisper as she scratched the graying fur beneath his chin. "Someone will come for you one day." But her voice always trembled with doubt. They all knew the truth. Older dogs were hard to place, blind ones even harder. Benny had arrived at the shelter after being found wandering the streets during a thunderstorm. He was thin, soaked, and covered in fleas. His eyes were clouded, one more than the other, and when the vet examined him, they realized he had been blind for a long time. Likely abandoned when his vision failed, Benny had survived who knows how long on his own. But survival wasn't the same as living. At the shelter, he was safe, fed, and had a warm place to sleep. But it wasn't home. It wasn't love. Most visitors passed his kennel without a glance. Some made a sympathetic sound and kept walking. "Poor thing," they'd say. "He's blind and old. Would be too sad to take him." So Benny stayed. Time moved slowly. Seasons changed. Dogs came and went, and Benny waited. His once deep golden fur grew whiter, and his joints stiffened. But still, every time footsteps echoed down the corridor, he lifted his head just a little, hoping. One rainy Tuesday morning, a mother and her little girl walked into the shelter, umbrellas dripping. The girl was around 8 years old, with curly brown hair and freckles that dotted her cheeks like stars. Her name was Lily, and her eyes shone with a quiet determination. She clutched a drawing in her hand, a crayon sketch of a dog with floppy ears and a wide smile. "I want to find this dog," she told the receptionist. "Not just any dog, this one." The receptionist smiled kindly. "Sweetheart, they're all special. Maybe you'll find one that feels like the one in your drawing." Lily nodded solemnly. "He's lonely," she said simply, "and I think he's waiting for me." They walked down the rows of kennels, pausing at each dog. Some barked and wagged. Others whined or jumped at the doors. Lily looked at them all with gentle eyes but shook her head each time. "Not him," she'd whisper. "Not her." She walked slowly, peering into each kennel with the seriousness of someone on a mission. Then they reached the far corner. "Who's that?" Lily asked, pointing to the dim pen half covered in shadows. "Oh, that's Benny," Sarah said, appearing behind them. "He's been here a long time. He's blind, sweet but shy." Lily stepped closer, ignoring the peeling paint and the scent of old metal and disinfectant. She crouched low, just outside the kennel. Benny didn't move. But then, his nose twitched. Slowly, he lifted his head. Lily didn't speak. She just waited. And then, after a long pause, Benny took a single step forward. Then another. And another. His nose moved through the bars until it gently brushed against Lily's hand. "He's found me," she whispered. Sarah blinked. So did her mother. It wasn't just a coincidence. There was something in the air, something soft and sacred. Benny, the forgotten blind dog, leaned his muzzle against the little girl's small palm, and for the first time in years he wagged his tail. The air outside the shelter was cool and damp, carrying the faint smell of wet leaves and earth. A gentle drizzle had begun again as Lily and her mother stood beneath the awning, watching the soft rain fall in streaks. But Lily wasn't paying attention to the rain or the cold or the way her shoes squished slightly with water. Her mind was still back in that quiet, dark corner of the shelter where Benny had touched her hand. She could still feel the warmth of his nose, the tremble in his breath, the hesitant trust in the way he had leaned forward. It wasn't just a meeting, it was something else. Something Lily couldn't put into words, but she felt it like a bloom in her chest. "Mom," she said softly, tugging on her mother's sleeve. "I want to take him home." Her mother looked down, surprised, her eyes filled with a mixture of tenderness and concern. "Lily, sweetheart, he's an old dog, and blind. Taking care of a dog like that is a big responsibility. It's not like getting a puppy." "I know," Lily said with quiet certainty. "But he's been alone for so long, I think he's tired of waiting." There was a pause as her mother knelt down to her level, brushing a damp curl from Lily's forehead. "I saw the way he came to you," she said softly. "It was like he knew you." Lily nodded, eyes wide and shining. "He did. I felt it." Inside, Sarah the volunteer was still standing near Benny's kennel, watching the way the old dog had turned in slow circles after Lily left, searching for her scent in the air like a dream he wasn't ready to wake from. When Lily and her mother returned inside, the woman looked up with a questioning smile. "We'd like to know more about Benny," her mother said, her voice gentler now. Sarah's face lit up, cautious, but hopeful. "Of course. He's about 10 years old, best we can guess. Lab mix. He's completely blind, but he navigates pretty well once he's used to his surroundings. He's quiet, very gentle. Doesn't ask for much. Honestly, he's just been overlooked. For years." Lily stepped back in front of the kennel, crouching again, her small fingers wrapping around the cold bars. "Hi again, Benny," she whispered. "It's me. I'm still here." Benny stirred, rising slowly to his feet. His joints cracked softly, his legs a bit wobbly, but he turned his nose toward the sound of her voice. Then, just like before, he took a few tentative steps and pressed his head against the bars where her hand waited. His tail thumped weakly behind him. That small gesture, so full of longing and trust, spoke louder than any bark or whine ever could. Her mother watched in silence, hand covering her mouth. Then, after a moment, she reached into her bag and pulled out a pen. "What do we need to do to adopt him?" she asked. Sarah blinked, almost in disbelief. "You're serious?" Lily's mother smiled, though her eyes glistened. "We are. The paperwork took a while, forms to fill out, signatures to provide, a short interview about home conditions and experience with dogs." While her mother handled the logistics, Lily stayed by Benny's side, humming softly to him. She told him about her room, how she had a beanbag shaped like a dog bone and fairy lights strung along the ceiling. She described the big backyard and how her dad had once built a birdhouse that no birds ever used. She promised to read to him every night, even if he couldn't see the pictures. Benny didn't move much, but he stayed pressed against the bars, breathing in her scent like it was sunlight after a long winter. Later that afternoon, when it came time to open the kennel door, Benny hesitated. Sarah crouched beside him, speaking gently. "It's okay, boy. You're going home." But Benny didn't move. For 5 years, this had been his entire world. Dark, small, safe in its routine. The outside was unknown, full of strange sounds and smells. But then Lily stepped forward and held out her hand, palm up, steady as a rock. "Come on, Benny," she said gently. "It's okay. I'll help you." And slowly, like a ship leaving the harbor for the first time in years, Benny stepped forward, first one paw, then another. He sniffed at the air, trembling, and brushed his nose against her fingers. Lily slipped a leash over his head, one Sarah provided that was soft and padded for comfort. Together, they walked through the shelter hall. Benny paused often, unsure of the world beyond his dark enclosure, but each time he hesitated, Lily would softly say, "I'm here," and he'd keep going. As they reached the front doors, the rain had finally stopped. The sky was a hazy gray, but to Benny, it was still darkness. Even so, something in him changed as he stepped over the threshold. His ears perked and he tilted his head toward the breeze. He hadn't felt fresh air on his face in so long. He lifted his nose and took a deep breath. The car ride was quiet. Benny lay in the back seat on a thick blanket Sarah had packed for him. Lily reached her hand between the seats, and Benny nuzzled it, his body finally beginning to relax. Every so often she'd whisper, "It's okay," and Benny's tail would wag once or twice in response. When they arrived home, Lily guided him gently. The grass in the yard felt strange beneath his paws, soft and cool. He sniffed at the ground, following invisible trails only he could detect. The house smelled warm and lived in, fresh cookies from earlier, laundry detergent, a faint hint of cinnamon. Lily led him through every room, slowly, letting him bump around and learn the space. She even tied tiny jingle bells on corners of furniture so Benny could find his way more easily. That night, Lily made him a bed beside hers, layered with pillows and her favorite blanket. She read to him from her storybook, one about a pirate who rescued a lost dog on a deserted island. And every now and then, Benny would sigh deeply, a sound that seemed to melt years of sadness into peace. Later, when her mother peeked in, she found Lily curled on her bed, one hand draped over the side, resting on Benny's back. And Benny, for the first time in half a decade, was asleep not out of exhaustion but comfort. His breathing was slow and even. His ears twitched now and then, but they weren't listening for doors slamming or barking kennels. They were simply at rest. His body no longer curled in on itself as if bracing for rejection. He was stretched out, comfortable, his chest rising and falling in rhythm with the quiet room. Outside, the rain had started again, tapping softly against the window panes. But inside that little bedroom, something profound had taken root. Not just love, but healing. The morning sunlight streamed gently through the windows of Lily's bedroom, casting a warm golden glow over the soft shapes in the room. Benny stirred first, not because he could see the light, he couldn't, but because he could feel it. There was a difference in the air. It smelled cleaner, gentler than the sharp disinfectant of the shelter. The warmth that wrapped around him didn't come from a metal heating vent. It came from the love that now filled this space like sunlight on a winter's day. He lifted his head slowly, ears twitching. He could hear birds chirping outside the window, something he hadn't heard clearly in years. There was also the gentle hum of life. Footsteps in the hallway, the soft clink of dishes downstairs. And then the most important sound, Lily's sleepy yawn as she rolled over in her bed. "Good morning, Benny," she mumbled, eyes still closed. His tail thumped softly on the floor. That simple exchange, that moment of being acknowledged, warmed Benny in a way no blanket ever had. He stood on shaky legs and inched his way toward the side of the bed. Lily reached over, her fingers finding his head, and gave him soft morning scratches behind the ears. Benny leaned into her touch, sighing, his entire body slowly shedding years of tension and abandonment. Lily's mom entered the room a few minutes later, smiling at the sight of them. "Breakfast, you two," she said, then paused. "Benny's first morning here. Should be special." Downstairs, she had already prepared something simple but comforting. Soft scrambled eggs for Benny mixed with his kibble, served in a new ceramic bowl with his name painted on the side in blue. Benny sniffed cautiously before taking his first bite, savoring each bit like it was a feast. For a dog who had eaten alone in a cold metal bowl for years, this meal, shared in a warm kitchen with the smell of toast and laughter, was a treasure. The rest of the day unfolded like a gentle breeze. Lily took it upon herself to show Benny around the house again, this time adding little sound cues as they moved. She tied more jingle bells to door handles, and set down a small rug at the entrance of each room so Benny could feel with his paws where he was. She even hung wind chimes by the back door so the soft tinkle would guide him when it was time to go outside. At first, Benny was hesitant. He bumped into walls. He got turned around. Sometimes he'd just stop in the middle of the room and wait, unsure which way was safe. But Lily was never far. "This way, Benny," she'd call gently. "I'm here." And that was all he needed. Her voice was his lighthouse. Lily's parents watched with quiet awe as their daughter transformed into something more than a child. She became a guide, a protector, a tiny shepherd leading an old soul back to life. Benny followed her everywhere, not just because he had no sight, but because he had faith in her. She became the light in his dark world. That afternoon, Lily decided it was time to introduce Benny to the backyard. They opened the sliding door, and Lily held the leash gently, walking slowly across the deck and down into the yard. Benny sniffed, cautiously, tail twitching. The smells were overwhelming: grass, dirt, squirrels, blossoms from the rose bush. But there was also freedom. For the first time in what must have felt like centuries, Benny was on soft earth again. He stepped slowly at first, testing the ground, his paws sinking ever so slightly into the grass. He paused, head lifted, nose twitching furiously as he drank in the vastness around him. Then, in a move that made Lily laugh out loud, he dropped to his side and rolled, legs flailing as he rubbed his back into the ground with unfiltered joy. "There it is," Lily cried. "You're smiling, Benny." It wasn't a smile in the human sense, but it was unmistakable. His mouth was slightly open, tongue lolling, ears back, not in fear, but in pleasure. His body, once curled tightly in the corner of a kennel, was now stretched across the earth like he had found heaven. Later that evening, Lily's dad set up a small tent in the yard and declared it camping night. They filled it with pillows and snacks, and of course Benny curled up in the center like a contented king. Lily lay beside him, tracing the shape of his ears with her fingertips. "Do you think he dreams?" she asked softly. Her father nodded. "All dogs dream. What do you think he dreams about? Maybe about running through meadows, chasing butterflies, or maybe he's dreaming about you." Lily smiled and curled closer to Benny, whispering, "You don't have to dream alone anymore." That night, the stars came out in full, shimmering above the tent like diamonds scattered across velvet. Benny couldn't see them, but he didn't need to. The warmth beside him was real. The laughter in the air was real. The pain he had carried for so long was beginning to lift, like fog in the morning sun. Over the next few days, the bond between Lily and Benny only deepened. They had their routines: morning breakfast together, backyard time, evening cuddles. Lily even started teaching him new commands using touch and sound. "Sit" was a light tap on his back. "Come" was a gentle whistle she repeated 3 times. And Benny, eager to please and finally feeling safe, learned quickly. One afternoon, while Lily was at school, Benny lay by the front door, waiting. He didn't whimper or pace. He just lay there, still and alert, ears turned toward the door like radar. He had memorized the rhythm of her return, the sound of the school bus, the click of the front gate, the tiny shuffle of her sneakers on, the porch. And when she finally walked through the door and called his name, his tail wagged so hard it thumped against the floor like a drum roll. "She's your whole world now, isn't she?" Lily's mother said softly as she watched from the kitchen. Benny leaned into Lily's legs, tail still thumping, body vibrating with joy. He couldn't see her smile, but he could feel it radiating from her skin like warmth from the sun. That evening, as they sat on the couch, Lily resting against her dad's side and Benny stretched out across their feet, the house seemed fuller somehow, like a new energy had settled into the walls. An energy that came from healing, from hope, from the quiet, patient love of a child who saw not with her eyes, but with her heart. And Benny, who had once sat alone in silence, surrounded by the cold bars of forgotten time, was now wrapped in the soft cocoon of family. The world hadn't changed his blindness, but Lily had taught him to see again. A week had passed since Benny arrived at his new home, and already it felt like he'd always belonged there. Every room now carried his scent, every doorway echoed with his cautious but steady footsteps, and every corner whispered with Lily's gentle encouragement. For a dog who once lived in shadows, Benny had found warmth, not in vision but in love. It was a Saturday morning when the routine changed. Lily was upstairs brushing her hair, singing softly to herself. Benny rested downstairs near the front door, head on his paws, listening to the familiar hums of weekend life, the vacuum in the other room, the distant clang of dishes. But then something changed. The vacuum shut off abruptly, and a loud bang echoed through the front hallway. A gust of wind rushed in. The front door had been left ajar, just an inch. But for Benny, guided entirely by sound, smell, and memory, it was disorienting. He lifted his head, nose twitching. New smells wafted. In grass, oil from the sidewalk, unfamiliar footsteps from passers-by, and something inside him stirred, a flicker of that old survival instinct. A voice buried deep inside his chest saying, "Move, escape, find something." And so he stood. His paws clicked uncertainly against the hardwood floor as he approached the open door. The sunlight pouring in confused him. It felt endless, not like the boundaries of his house. Still, something urged him forward. Maybe he thought he'd find Lily out there. Maybe he remembered the open fields of the backyard and thought this was the same. Benny stepped through. The moment he reached the sidewalk, the wind caught his ears and pulled at his fur. The world was louder, harsher. Distant traffic buzzed, like bees. Barking echoed from another yard. A car honked somewhere far off. He froze, nose darting in every direction, but he couldn't place anything. There were no jingle bells, no soft rugs, no Lily, and then panic. He turned left, then right, then back again. His nails scraped the sidewalk. A bicyclist zipped past, startling him into running blindly. He darted down the street, each sound growing louder and more disorienting. He was lost. Inside the house, Lily came down the stairs humming, expecting to find Benny curled up by the door. But the space was empty. "Mom?" she called out. "Where's Benny?" Her mother stepped out from the kitchen, frowning. "I thought he was with you." Panic bloomed like fire in Lily's chest. She rushed to the front door and gasped. It was open. "No, no, 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 Benny." She sprinted outside, barefoot, her voice cracking with each shout. "Benny! Benny, come back!" Her parents followed, phones in hand, already dialing neighbors and posting online. But Lily didn't stop to wait. She ran down the sidewalk, calling his name again and again, tears burning her eyes. For Benny, every step forward took him further into chaos. He veered into a bush, then stumbled into a curb. The unfamiliar sense overwhelmed his sensitive nose. He turned toward a park, recognizing nothing. His breathing quickened. His heart raced. Everything in him screamed to hide. But there was nowhere safe until suddenly he heard it. A voice, faint, far away, but unmistakable. "Benny!" He stopped. It came again. "Benny, please!" That voice, it was his anchor, the only sound in the world that meant love. He whimpered, tail tucked tightly, and then he turned. Slowly, painfully, he followed the voice. Lily had reached the park, chest heaving, scanning every bush, every tree. Her eyes flicked left and right, wild with desperation. Her voice was hoarse from yelling. "Benny, I'm here. I didn't mean to leave the door open. I'm so sorry. Please come back, please." And then she heard it, a soft whine. She froze. "Benny?" The whine came again, just ahead. She ran toward it and saw him. He stood trembling behind a trash can covered in leaves, his fur dusty, a small cut on his leg. He looked like a ghost, a shadow of the joyful dog who'd rolled in the grass just days ago. But when she called again, "Benny, it's me," he moved. Not fast, not with excitement, but with absolute trust. He staggered toward her, his head lowered, nose guiding him forward, tail barely twitching. Lily dropped to her knees. He collapsed into her arms. "I've got you," she whispered, sobbing into his fur. "I've got you. You're okay now." Back at home, Lily's mom cleaned Benny's wound while her dad brought water. The cut wasn't deep, just a scrape from when he'd fallen on the curb. Physically, he'd be fine, but emotionally, he was rattled. He paced more, flinched at sudden noises, and when Lily left the room, even for a moment, he whimpered. That night, as Lily sat curled next to him, her tiny fingers brushing through his fur, she whispered, "I didn't know what it would feel like to lose you. I don't ever want to feel that again." She sat up, thinking. "Wait here," she told him. She returned minutes later with something in her hands, a small collar. She had tied a tiny silver bell to it, one that jingled with even the slightest movement. She slipped it gently over his neck. "There," she said. "Now I'll always hear you. And I want you to always hear me too." From that night on, she made a promise. No more unlocked doors. No more assuming he'd just be where he was. No more forgetting, even for a second, that Benny wasn't just a pet. He was her responsibility. He was her best friend. And most of all, he was her heart. The next morning, she spent hours in the backyard, building what she called Benny's path. She laid down textured rugs in a winding trail, placed soft-scented markers along the way, lavender, vanilla, cinnamon, tied chimes to low branches. She created a world where Benny could move freely, where the fear of being lost would never creep in again. Benny, in return, began to come back to himself, slowly. Each day a little more tail wagging, a little more lounging in the sun. And every time Lily called his name now, he came quicker. Not because he feared being alone again, but because he trusted that she'd always be there, even when the world was loud, even when he couldn't see. She was his light. She was his voice in the dark. And from then on, when people passed by and saw the little girl walking her blind dog through the neighborhood, his bell gently ringing with every step, they often stopped and watched. Some took photos, some wiped their eyes, and some just smiled. Because they knew what they were witnessing wasn't just a pet and his owner. It was something sacred, something rare. It was love, walking in perfect rhythm, even when the world went dark. Months had passed since Benny first stepped paw into Lily's home, and the seasons had slowly shifted, spring yielding to summer, then turning to fall. With each passing day, the little blind dog and the bright-eyed girl grew more inseparable. Lily had made it her mission not just to care for Benny, but to show him that life, despite its darkness, could still be magical. In their small town, people began to take notice. At the local park, Benny's soft silver bell had become a familiar sound. When families came with their children and their pets, they often paused to watch Lily lead Benny gently through the grass, guiding him with whispered words and tender encouragement. She'd taught him how to sit when she tapped his front paw, how to turn when she touched his shoulder, and how to come to her when she clapped twice. Their communication was wordless magic, and yet there was more than obedience in Benny's responses. There was trust, deep, unshakable trust. One afternoon, the town held a pet fair. Booths lined the square, filled with vendors selling homemade treats, rescue organizations sharing stories, and pet lovers from all over displaying their companions. Lily and Benny arrived together, her tiny hand resting gently on his back as they walked between the tents. People gasped softly as they passed. "That's the blind dog from the shelter, isn't it?" a woman whispered. "Yes," another replied. "The one who was there for years, the little girl adopted him." They're incredible together. Lily didn't hear the whispers. She was focused only on Benny, smiling every time his tail gave a little wag or he raised his head at a new scent. She guided him to a shaded tent and sat down beside him on a blanket she had brought. She didn't come to show off. She came so Benny could belong. Then something unexpected happened. A woman from the rescue booth approached them holding a clipboard. Her eyes were gentle, filled with emotion. "Hi," she said softly, kneeling beside them. "You must be Lily, and this must be Benny." Lily looked up, nodding shyly. "I'm Sarah," the woman said. "I run the shelter where Benny used to live. I remember him well. He was with us so long, but we never thought he'd get adopted, and even if he did, we didn't think he'd thrive." She paused, her voice cracking slightly. "But seeing him now, I just wanted to thank you." Lily looked down at Benny, who was now dozing in the sun, peaceful and safe. "I didn't do anything special," she said quietly. "I just loved him." Sarah smiled, tears in her eyes. "That's the most special thing anyone could ever do." Later, that day, something else happened that would change everything. The event organizers asked Lily if she and Benny would be willing to come up on the small stage and share their story. At first, Lily hesitated. She wasn't used to crowds, and Benny, well, he didn't like too much noise, but something inside her told her it was important. So holding Benny's leash, she stepped onto the wooden stage as the announcer handed her a microphone. The sun was beginning to set behind them, casting a golden light over the crowd. Lily took a breath. "This is Benny," she began, her voice small but steady. "He's blind. He was in the shelter for a really long time. Nobody wanted him because he couldn't see. But I did." The crowd was quiet. "When I first met him, he was scared. He didn't trust anyone. He didn't even want to come out of his bed. But I knew he just needed someone to believe in him." Benny sat beside her, facing the crowd even though he couldn't see them. His little bell jingled as he shifted, leaning against her leg. "I didn't adopt him to be a hero. I knew how it feels to be lonely. Sometimes kids feel that way too. I guess I thought maybe we could not feel so lonely if we were lonely together." At that, someone in the crowd gasped. A soft murmur rippled through the listeners, tears welling in more than a few eyes. "But Benny's not scared anymore," Lily continued, smiling down at him. "He's brave. He walks through the world like it belongs to him, because now it does." She looked up at the audience, her eyes shining. "I think dogs don't need perfect homes. They just need love, and love makes them brave." The applause that followed wasn't loud or raucous. It was soft, full of emotion. Parents hugged their children. A man wiped his eyes discreetly with his sleeve. Even Sarah from the shelter had her hand over her heart. After the fair, something began to shift in the town. More people visited the shelter. Older dogs, dogs with health issues, dogs who had been there for far too long, started finding homes. Families said they were inspired by Benny, inspired by the little girl who showed what patience and love could do. Lily and Benny had unknowingly started a quiet revolution. Local papers shared their story. A photo of Lily kissing Benny's forehead beneath a tree made the front page with the headline, "A blind dog waited for years until one child helped him see love." And though Benny would never see with his eyes, he had come to see with something even deeper. He recognized Lily's scent in any crowd, heard her giggle in a sea of noise. Her touch meant safety. Her voice meant joy. At night, when Lily curled up in her bed, Benny was never far. He had a soft bed beside hers, but more often than not, he would rest his head on the edge of her mattress, his bell gently jingling with every sleepy sigh. One evening, as rain tapped softly on the windows and thunder rumbled in the distance, Lily turned to her mother with a sleepy smile. "Mom," she whispered, "do you think Benny dreams?" Her mother tucked the blanket around her. "I think he does," she said, "and I think his dreams are full of love now. Because of you." Lily yawned, reaching down to stroke Benny's ear. "I hope he dreams of when we met." Benny stirred at the sound of her voice and gave a contented huff. Even in sleep, her voice brought him comfort. And somewhere in that darkness, Benny did dream. Not of the cold cement walls of the shelter, not of the loneliness that once haunted his every breath, but of sunlight, of grass beneath his paws, of laughter, of tiny hands guiding him forward, of warmth, of bells, of love. He dreamed of Lily, because in his world, She wasn't just a little girl. She was light. She was hope. She was everything.